When I slept with his cousin.
Oh my goodness.
I wonder what he was coming to my house for.
Rubber in hand and peels another one.
This is exactly what this is.
Because of you. I contact this man.
No,
If he had any doubt that my son was not his child.
Just a mess.
You told me, and I want to find out.
He really does care about me.
Were you intimate with this guy? You said it's your new friend.
Yes, I slept with his cousin several times too.
You need to stop making them.
Ms. Touré confronted Mr. Lacey in court, insisting that he's the father of her adult son, Trevin. Despite her assertions, Mr. Lacey expressed doubt about his paternity and confirmed he hadn't signed Trevin's birth certificate. This may lead to ultimate insanity in paternity court.
Ms. Touré, you are in court to prove to your ex-boyfriend, Mr. Lacey, that he is the biological father of your adult son, Trayvon Lacey. You state that the defendant has been an absentee father, full of excuses, and you want it all to end today in court with the truth.
Yes, Your Honor.
Tell the court.
Well, it's not fair to my son, and he really needs to man up because he's depriving my child of a father.
Mr. Lacey was given an opportunity by Hamilton County to request a DNA test, but chose to accept paternity instead. This resulted in a child support case. Despite Mr. Lacey being on the birth certificate and paying child support, he expressed exhaustion over the ongoing doubts and disputes regarding Trevin's paternity.
Hamilton County gave him a window of an opportunity to say yes or nay, I want a DNA. He said, no, it's my son. We went forth with the child support case.
You don't remember any of that happening?
No, ma'am.
Yes, he
That's not the way I remembered it happening, Your Honor.
Okay, but he's on the birth certificate.
He is.
So he is the legal father.
Yes.
As far
And
as
his
she's
court
saying.
papers say he's paying child support.
Yes.
You paying
and
child support?
I have proof that, Your Honor.
Mr. Lacey has been paying child support intermittently over the years, accumulating a total of $37,000. Despite periods of unemployment, he managed to reduce this amount to almost $5,000. Furthermore, Ms. Touré mentioned another potential father for Trayvon. She approached this man, but he denied paternity, asserting that Trayvon doesn't resemble his other children.
It's past due. You've paid all of that. So throughout these years, you've paid.
I've been paying off and on. You know, sometimes during them years I was unemployed. As soon as I find employment again, then, you know, my wages start being garnished.
But you've managed to pay that $37,000 down to almost $5,000.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you getting it done.
And the only thing that Miss Touré have told me is this, because I asked her about the other gentleman.
After an intimate encounter with Touré, Mr. Lacey left abruptly. For a significant duration following this, Miss Touré did not see him. It was during this period that she began a relationship with another man. When Mr. Lacey eventually returned, after being away to attend to family matters for a week, he found the other man at Miss Touré's house.
It was over.
So wait a minute, you all in this relationship, everything's going fine, then you come back home and Mr. Lacey is gone?
No, Mr. Lacey had sex with me and took off.
Oh, so after he had
He had sex
left.
with me and took off. I didn't see him for a long time after that.
Yeah.
That's
Wait,
how
I
me and
thought
this
you
other
said he
guy
moved
got
in.
together.
I thought you
Your
said he
Honor.
moved in.
Yes, he did. That was after the fact. He came back and caught the guy.
Miss Touré asserts Mr. Lacey was the only man she was intimate with during the time of conception. However, Mr. Lacey is skeptical due to the pregnancy timeline. After their relationship, Miss Touré quickly moved on to another man, known as the Pajama Guy, within weeks.
And he was the only man I had sex at in that time frame. Because I didn't have any, I didn't know nobody else.
Pregnant, and we had only been together for no more than a month. How could Trayvon be my child?
Because DNA gonna tell you it's your child. We were just having sex.
Well, I get that, unprotected, I guess.
Of
Yes,
course.
ma'am.
So,
Rubber in hand and peels another one.
how soon after that did you transition to Pajama Guy?
About 2
About
weeks
three-
after.
yeah, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks.
Miss Bovell discovers through a call from her brother that the man she's believed to be her father, Mr. Bovell, has doubts about his paternity due to events that occurred before her birth. These doubts surfaced 2 years ago, leading to an unsettled period and a wish for resolution through a paternity test, which Mr. Bovell had initially avoided.
Ms. Boville, 2 years ago, you and your mother were shocked when the man you always believed is your dad told you he is not your biological father. You tried to bring the defendant to paternity court 6 months ago, but say he backed out of his appearance. Now that he is here, today you state the DNA results will finally prove your case. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bovell chooses Thanksgiving weekend to reveal doubts about being Carrie's biological father. His suspicions stem from when he first met Regina in Boston and later moved to Springfield, where he encountered claims that Regina was involved with another man. The resultant insanity lead to a pivotal moment requiring paternity clarification.
Mr. Boville?
Yes,
You
Your Honor.
decided to make this call on Thanksgiving weekend, sir?
I asked one of my sons for Carrie's number because I wanted to share something with him. When I told my son how I felt about this situation that we're here today for, My sons brought the information to Carrie.
What
Only-
got you to this point? What led you to this point where you
Okay.
said, I have to talk about this?
Mr. Bovel, harboring doubts about being Carrie's biological father due to past rumors, experiences a pivotal moment 4 years ago in North Carolina. Meeting Carrie's cousin, who is notably the granddaughter of a man married to a family member suspected to be Carrie's biological father, he observes a striking resemblance between her and Carrie.
So all of these years, Mr. Boville, you believe that this other man, who's married to a family member, could be Carrie's biological father?
Yes, Your Honor. What convinced me was 4 years ago, I went to North Carolina and I finally met some of Carrie's cousin, his granddaughter. Your Honor, if I had a picture and showed it to you right now of her cousin, you would believe that would be Carrie. If I showed you her picture, you would believe that was Carrie.
Judge Lake scrutinizes the circumstances around Carrie's conception, querying any possibilities of another potential father, which Mr. Bovel negates. An interesting revelation is that Mr. Bovel's name is absent from Carrie's birth certificate. Although Miss Duval is accused of not allowing him to sign it, she refutes this, stating Mr. Bovel never took the initiative despite her urging.
During the window of time in which Carrie was conceived, the question really becomes, were you intimate with anyone else during that time?
No, ma'am.
Where there could be another potential father for this beautiful young
No,
woman?
ma'am.
At the end of the day, in paternity court, that's the question we have to answer. What is interesting is in the court papers, I found her birth certificate. There is no father listed.
Miss Duval vehemently denies allegations that she was intimate with another family member, calling them a lie straight from hell. She believes the motive behind such rumors and allegations is sheer dishonesty. Meanwhile, despite Mr. Bovel expressing love and acceptance for Carrie, she confronts him, questioning the authenticity of his paternal role and involvement in her life.
That's my baby. That's my
That
baby.
is a lie straight from hell.
Your Honor.
That's a lie
You know
straight
what?
from hell.
Your
So
Honor.
let me ask you this, and we are in court and I need your answer to be truthful. Why would they start this type of rumor? Why?
Your Honor.
Especially a person in the family. What would be the motive?
The motive to me, if he was saying any of that, the motive was he was just a liar too.
An emotional moment unfolds in the courtroom as Carrie, through tears, conveys the profound pain and suffering she and her siblings have endured due to Mr. Bovel's absence and dysfunctional behavior. She describes allowing herself to be hurt by others due to lacking the love of a father and emphasizes the unique pain it inflicts, especially as a black woman.
I mean, apology.
Mr. Boville,
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm gonna ask you one last time to be I'm so sick of hearing your mouth.
All right, I won't say
I mean,
another
just
word,
the
Your Honor.
sound of your voice.
I won't say another
in
word,
my
Your Honor.
ear right now, while
won't say
this
another
young
word.
girl is trying to express to you what your absence, what your dysfunction, what your mistakes have cost her.
Yes, you're right, Your Honor.
Go ahead, Miss Bo.
Carrie shares her struggles and sparse encounters with her possibly estranged father, Mr. Bovel, expressing frustration over his jail stint and his fixation on discussing her mother's past during their rare meetings. Despite being smart and aware, the emotional burden of her father's absence and disregard is palpable, showing that their history doesn't concern her. Her present emotional pain does.
My grandmother brought us on a bus from South Carolina
No, she
to
didn't. No, she
Massachusetts.
didn't. My mother
that
did.
picture that I sent here with me and his other daughter and my other two brothers sitting on the couch was when we went to Boston. That was the first time I've been back to Boston since I was born that I can remember.
And when you went back, did he make an attempt to get to know you, to see you?
He was in jail.
Mr. and Mrs. Knowles previously appeared in court for a paternity case with Mr. Lindsley. They are back due to another paternity dispute over their 3-month-old son, Tyler Jr. The Knowles believe Mr. Lindsley is falsely claiming paternity to disrupt their family. Mr. Lindsley asserts he was with Mrs. Knowles around the same time as her husband.
Mr. and Mrs. Knowles, you previously appeared in court with the defendant for a paternity case involving another child. You're back today because this love triangle has led you to yet another paternity dispute. Mr. and Ms. Knowles, you say you need to prove to Mr. Lindsay that he is not the father of your 3-month-old son, Tyler Jr., and believe he's claiming paternity to bust up your happy family. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Lindsley presented a calendar as evidence to indicate that Mrs. Knowles was either sleeping with both him and Mr. Knowles, or just him during the time she would have conceived Tyler Jr. He claimed she was living at his house until the end of April, even though she asserts she was back with Mr. Knowles around March 22nd.
According to what I have calculated up and with the evidence that I have here, she was either sleeping with both of us or sleeping with me because she was living at my house during the time that she would have conceived.
Really? Let me see that. Thank you, Jerome. What does this evidence show me,
It's
Mr.
a calendar.
Lindsley?
Around the 22nd of March, when she actually didn't move out of my house until closer to the end of April.
Mrs. Knowles clarifies that she wasn't staying with Mr. Lindsley. Instead, she was living with a close friend. She and Mr. Lindsley separated in mid-March. Around March 22nd, she left her sister's place with Mr. Knowles and his mother and went to live with him. During that week, she did not see or have any interactions with Mr. Lindsley.
And so she wasn't even really staying with Mr. Lindsley at the time.
She was staying with a friend of hers.
So then that means that she wouldn't have even been staying with you until the beginning of May.
Me and Mr. Lindsley officially separated in the middle of March. I was living with one of my closest friends for until March 22nd. March 22nd, he came and got me from my sisters with his mother, and we went and lived with him.
Mr. Lindsley is confused about Mrs. Knowles' inconsistent claims regarding paternity. She denies contacting him, but he alleges she uses a messaging app to reach out. The situation is chaotic, and Mrs. Knowles wants to end the drama for her children's sake.
There's no possibility. I mean, it's not like this is you guys' first rodeo here.
I really don't know why she changes her mind every 2 months.
Why do you say every 2 months?
We'll quit talking for a month and a half here and there, and then next I know, I'll get a message from a random number talking about, hi.
There is no way, shape, or form I contact this man.
Mrs. Knowles and Mr. Lindsley dispute their relationship timeline. She insists that mutual friends were aware of her marriage, while he alleges ignorance. After separating, a mysterious text emerges suggesting a potential marriage between Mrs. Knowles and Dustin. The judge identifies their situation as a love triangle.
Wasn't working.
That's pretty
I
funny
couldn't
that you was
do
pushing him away to be with me
Miss
when I didn't know
Knowles?
about him for the whole year we was together.
And that's a lie and a half, because the friend that hooked me and you up and started dating even knew about my husband.
And that's the truth.
But that ain't
She
what we're
sent me
here
a
for.
text.
We're here for the kid.
She sent me a text one day. I didn't know who it was because it was a weird number. After me and her separated, I thought she wanted to leave me, so I deleted her number out of my phone.
Miss Moffett believed Mr. Johnson was her father until 2 years ago when another man messaged her on Facebook claiming to be her biological father. This man even sent her a childhood photo of herself and mentioned she has 2 other siblings. This revelation has left Miss Moffett confused and in shock.
Ms. Moffett, you always believed the defendant was your dad until 2 years ago when you received a message from a man claiming to be your biological father. You are tired of the confusion and are petitioning the court for a paternity test to prove the defendant is your dad. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Johnson had doubts about being Miss Moffett's father since he knew 2 other men were involved with her mother at the same time. Miss Moffett's mother shared that she and Mr. Johnson had a romantic relationship that lasted for about 2 years. Even though Mr. Johnson was married, they would secretly meet, often at Burger King. After their relationship, Miss Moffett's mother moved to Mississippi.
Mr. Johnson, tell me why you have doubts.
Me and 2 more other guys was, at the time was dealing with Miss Moffett. I just had doubts that I was her biological father at the time when she was little. I didn't know. I really didn't. I didn't know if I was the father or not.
What was the nature of your relationship with Mr. Johnson?
Well, Mr. Johnson and I met when I was young. We fell in love.
Miss Moffett's mother wasn't sure who the father of her child was. She visited Mr. Johnson in Maywood, but since he was at work, she went to a friend's house, Mr. Saunders, whom she had previously dated. She had intimate relations with both Mr. Saunders and Mr. Johnson on the same day, leading to her uncertainty about the paternity.
Ms. Moffett,
Yes, Your Honor.
tell the court what happened when you found out you were pregnant.
I wasn't sure who was the father because I had went out to Maywood to see Mr. Johnson. And at that time, Mr. Johnson was at work, so I stayed around till he get off work so we can see each other. But in the meantime, I had went to one of my friend houses named Mr. Saunders, which I was dating before Mr. Johnson.
Miss Moffett's mother showed Mr. Johnson a picture of her daughter, Rissa, and informed him that he could potentially be the father. However, she was honest and also mentioned Mr. Saunders as another potential father. Mr. Johnson admitted that from that moment, he harbored significant doubts about being the child's father.
I brought it to him. I showed him.
You brought it to him, and what did you say when you brought the picture?
I told him, I said, here's Rissa, and here's your child, that you could be a possible father. And then also I did let him know about Mr. Saunders at the same time.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
So you brought him this picture and said you could be the father.
Yes.
And there's also another potential father, Mr. Saunders. Is that what you said?
Yes, Your Honor.
Miss Moffat's mother admitted to telling both Mr. Johnson and Mr. Saunders they were the father without informing the other. While Mr. Johnson suspected paternity due to shared eye color traits, Miss Moffat only learned of the dual claims 2 years prior.
Mr. Johnson didn't know that I was leading Mr. Saunders on, letting him know, Mr. Saunders, that he was the dad as well. He didn't know that I told Mr. Saunders that he was a dad also.
Okay, so why are you telling two men they're the biological father?
Because Mr. Saunders knew I had sex with him. You know, we had sex, and Mr. Johnson, and then at the same time that Rissa was conceived, that he kind of figured that.
Miss Moffat's mother couldn't contact Mr. Saunders when Nerissa was in a coma. Once Nerissa awoke, she provided contact info. Despite Mr. Saunders' previous claims of being Nerissa's father, he made excuses to avoid visiting her in the hospital, even though he had been insistent about his paternity before.
Mr. Saunders also come to the hospital, Miss Moffat?
No, he did. And then when...
Did you let him know? Did you tell him?
Well, I didn't have any information for Mr. Saunders to let him know what's going on, but when Rissa came out of her coma, gave me information and get contact with him because she wanted him to come and see her. But he made every excuse, the reason why he couldn't come. But if he claimed to be her daughter.
Miss Gray claims that while Mr. Pearson acknowledges their 2 older children, he denies being the father of their 10-month-old daughter, Camilla. Mr. Pearson believes another member of his family is Camilla's father. Miss Gray desires for him to be involved in Camilla's life and treat her equally.
Ms. Gray, you say the defendant, Mr. Pearson, has ripped your family apart because of his denial that he is your 10-month-old daughter, Camilla's dad. You say he never denied your 2 oldest kids, but refuses to believe he is the biological dad of baby Camilla, your youngest. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Pearson began having suspicions when he noticed a man visiting his home while he was at work. He believes if someone cheats once, they'll do it again. Upon being questioned, Miss Gray admitted to sleeping with Mr. Pearson's cousin as an act of revenge after he left her for his cousin's ex-girlfriend.
You moved in with your cousin?
Yeah, because at that time I didn't have suspicions until, we started to move out, and I started thinking, I said, I wonder what he was coming to my house for. I'm leaving to go to work, so who was he there for? And then I moved out of there and I moved to a friend of mine's house. That's when they allegedly started messing with each other. But I look at it as if you did it once, you did it then, you've done it before, you've done it, you'll do it again.
Mr. Pearson challenges the timeline presented by Miss Gray, suggesting that if she and his cousin had a relationship at a later point, they might have had relations before. He believes that Camilla might be his cousin's child, citing resemblances. Miss Gray retorts, insane by his constant accusations of her infidelity.
It happened at his aunt's house. Neither that house that we was living in that he's talking about did his cousin come while he was working, because he wasn't working. I was the only one who was working in that house.
Either way it goes, if they was able to build relations then, at that present time, I'm quite sure they was able to build relations before. Like I said, I am a man, and I know how the game rolls.
Judge Lake addresses Mr. Pearson about Camilla's paternity. Miss Gray had indicated Mr. Pearson believed he was the father. Yet, when Mr. Pearson found out about the pregnancy, Miss Gray told him the baby was his cousin Theo's. Wow, this must be hard to hear.
Mr. Pearson, we're here talking about the paternity relating to baby Camilla. Miss Gray has testified that you've indicated that Camilla is your biological child, and Mr. Pearson, your cousin, has indicated that he is aware that you were sleeping with Miss Gray. Are these things true?
Yes, Your Honor.
Judge Lake highlights Mr. Pearson's doubts about Camilla's paternity due to inconsistent stories. Despite his cousin's paternity concerns based on the timing, Miss Gray insists the baby isn't his cousin's. Mr. Pearson remains skeptical. Only the DNA will reveal the truth.
Now you see where I get my doubts, Your Honor?
And that's exactly what I was getting to. We have to say that there is a level of credibility to this doubt Mr. Pearson is expressing, because he hasn't gotten a straight answer.
Never have.
And so
never will.
And look, I'm just saying, if we're lying about how many times, why not also lie about when?
Mr. Pearson explains his reasons for being with Miss Gray. He denies visiting her solely when his cousin was at work. He mentions bonding with her son, DeMonte. However, Judge Lake jokes that he was also playing with Miss Gray. Later, Mr. Pearson admits his actions were out of spite due to his cousin's relationship with his ex.
How do you do that to your cousin? Now, you know he's on his way going to work.
No, it wasn't like how he puts it. I wouldn't just come over there just because he'd be going to work or anything like that. They had a son there. I would always go over there to see DeMonte. I would go play with DeMonte. I didn't disrespect him until he disrespected me.
In all honesty, it sounds like you went over to play with DeMonte and then you ended up playing with his mother.